Hello, my sweet friends. Welcome back to the Lantern Lit Hollow. Here, stories glow softly and help you drift off to sleep. So grab your favorite blanket, snuggle in nice and cozy, and when you're ready, we'll begin. This evening's tale is a very well-known story from Hans Christian Andersen called The Little Mermaid. Once upon a time, there was a king with 6 beautiful daughters, but he was not a king of the human world. His lands lay far, far below the waves, where fish flash like little jewels amongst the reefs and craggy rocks. The king and the 6 princesses lived in a wonderful palace made of glowing coral and gleaming shells. The girls' mother had died, but their grandmother took good care of them. Of all the princesses, the youngest was the most beautiful. Her long, flowing hair floated around her like a golden cloud, and her tail shimmered with blue, green, and silver. If there was one thing that the princesses loved above all else, it was to hear their grandmother tell them stories of the land above the waves. There, she told them, human beings walked on strange things called legs. An extraordinary fish swam through the air, flapping their long fins. The more the old merwoman talked of this strange world, the more the youngest mermaid longed to see it.
"When you are 15,
her grandmother promised,
you shall go."
when the eldest princess was old enough, she swam to the surface, returning the next day to tell of the wonderful things she had seen. "There are glittering cities," she said, "with twinkling lights and the sounds of humans laughing. And there are huge ships as large as palaces that sail across the sea in the sunshine." Year after year, one after another, the mermaid princesses grew old enough to swim up to the world of humans. Each one of them came back with stories of strange and beautiful sights. At last, the time came for the youngest mermaid to see the world she had longed to visit. As she rose to the surface for the first time, the sun was just setting, tinging the sky with pink and gold. Nearby, a fine ship was drifting gently, for there was very little wind. As the little mermaid watched, a handsome prince came onto the deck and looked out across the sea. He did not know that he was being watched, or that the little mermaid could not take her eyes off of his face. Darkness fell and the ship began to toss as the wind rose. A dreadful storm wrenched away the sails and the rigging, and huge waves crashed onto the deck, tearing apart the planks. As the ship sank, the little mermaid caught sight of the handsome prince struggling in the water. Before long, the prince closed his eyes, too tired to stay afloat any longer. But the little mermaid held up his head and guided him gently to shore. When the morning came, the wind dropped and the sun rose. The little mermaid stayed near the shore so that she could watch over the sleeping prince. A little while later, some girls from the nearby town came down to the sea. The prince woke as they bent over him on the sand, smiling as they helped him away. Only the little mermaid felt sad. She feared that she would never see him again. After that, the little mermaid often rose to the surface, eager for a sight of the prince. She watched his beautiful palace from the nearby sea, and sometimes saw him walking amongst his courtiers. Yet she grew sadder and sadder until she could not bear it any longer. She decided to go see the water witch. The water witch lived in a deep, dark part of the ocean, where water snakes writhe in the cold water. When she saw the little mermaid, she laughed.
"I know why you've come,"
she said.
"You want to go and live in the human world so that you can be near the prince. You want me to turn your mermaid's tail into human legs, ugly as they are. But do you know the price you will have to pay?
No, whispered the princess, but I will pay it gladly to be a human.
I shall need your voice, with which you sing so sweetly,
said the witch.
Then I can turn you into a human girl, as lovely as any that walks on earth. But remember, if the prince does not love you with all of his heart and take you for his wife, you will turn into sea foam and be lost forever. You can never return to your home beneath the waves.
Please hurry, said the mermaid. I have already decided. So the water witch gave the little mermaid a potion to drink. The princess rose to the surface and swam beneath the prince's palace. A terrible sadness overwhelmed her as she drank the potion, for she knew how much she was leaving behind. But her sadness was all but forgotten when she stood for the first time before the prince she loved. He at once wanted to meet the beautiful stranger, and although she could not speak to him, he soon found that he could not bear to be apart from her, but kept her by his side always. The little mermaid loved the young man more and more each day, but he never thought of marrying her.
You remind me of a girl who once saved me from drowning,
he said.
She is the only one I could ever really love.
The poor little mermaid could not tell him that he had already met her. Months passed, and the prince's mother and father urged him to find a bride. At last, he agreed to meet a princess in a nearby country. Of course, the little mermaid went with him on the royal ship, although she felt as if her heart was breaking. When the prince stepped on shore and met the new princess for the first time, he was so dazzled by her beauty that he believed he was meeting the girl who had saved him from the sea.
"It is you!"
he cried.
"I have found the girl I shall love for the rest of my life."
Preparations for the wedding were made at once. It was a magnificent affair with flowers and silks and jewels. Everyone cheered with joy to see the happy pair. Only the little mermaid was silent, and her tears fell unseen. That night, as the prince and his bride were guided to their cabin on the royal ship, the little mermaid stood on the deck and gazed at the dark water. At dawn, she would be turned into sea foam, never to see or hear or love again. But as she stood there, the little mermaid's sisters rose to the surface of the water. Their flowing hair was cut short. "We gave it to the water witch," they said, "in return for this knife. If you kill the prince tonight, you will be free of the spell and can return to live with us in your home under the sea." The little mermaid took the knife, but when she stood above the sleeping prince, she knew that she could never harm him, as she loved him too much. Weeping, she flung the knife away and plunged into the sea. But instead of turning into foam, the little mermaid found herself floating into the air, the ship sailing on far below. Around her were lovely creatures made of golden light. "We are the daughters of the air," they said. "By doing kind acts for others, we gain happiness ourselves. You belong with us, little mermaid, where you can be happy at last." As the little mermaid rose into the sunshine, she looked down at the prince and his bride standing on the deck of the ship. And for the first time in a long, long while, she smiled with happiness. And that brings our tale to an end, my sweet friends. Now it is time to turn the lantern down to a soft glow. Snuggle with your favorite stuffy and let yourself drift off to dreamland. Sleep sweet, my dear friends, and I'll be here when next you return to the lantern lit hollow. Good night.